Hey TV fans, Board now back with you on this video. I'm gonna be reviewing the first two episodes of From. So episode 1 is called A Long Day's Journey into Night. Episode 2 is called The Way Things Are Now. So full spoilers for this, the first two episodes of the Epix mystery thriller sci-fi series, which is from Jack Bender. He's one of the main producers slash writers behind it. He of course was a big writer and director on Lost, and this has a very Lost sort of feel to it at times. And it also stars Harold Pillio, who was in Lost as Michael. He's the lead of the show as the sheriff of this mysterious town. A few other faces you might recognise here and there. Ian Bailey is probably the main one, playing the father of this family who come in from out of town. So the setup for the series is then you have this, as I said, mysterious town with dark secrets lurking within. You have what's set up very early on is these creatures who are on the outside, who are terrorizing the town. We find out that because of this, the town has a curfew, and they tried to get in by getting inside people's heads and forcing them to come to the windows and see them, or to let them in, and that's sort of the only way they can threat. But because of this, the town is on alert, and they have a very particular way of doing things. So you get this family coming in from the outside in an RV because they're on a camping trip. So they're going through town, and it becomes clear quite early on that the sheriff, to distract them, trying to throw them off and put them off from coming towards the town. But one thing leads to another. They have a mysterious crash accident which forces them into the town and puts them in harm's danger. So from then on, the sheriff and the rest of the town have to look after them and protect them, but has to introduce them. And there's also another car which crashes around the same time, with again two people in it. One of them they both get really badly injured, but one of them goes to the local sort of hospital, and there's a whole thing that happens to him, and the other one is treated by the side of the road by the paramedics. So these characters are outsiders to the town. So that's the setup. Then you have these mysterious creatures who are the threat, but there's also mystery in the background to them and to some of the town. This is one which was on my radar, or has been on my radar for quite a while. They just finished airing the second season earlier on this year, and it always sounded like one which would intrigue me and kind of be in my wheelhouse of the sort of sci-fi mystery type show which I can enjoy. And I'll just give my overall thoughts really on the first two episodes. The reason I'm reviewing them as a pair is, I think, because they do go quite well together. They do feel a little bit of a two-part pilot. Also, then it does go really crazy later on, and there's lots of weird stuff going on. So it'll be very interesting as I go through this show to see what exactly does happen and what sort of things it goes into, and how it develops, because obviously Lost is a show which has a particular reputation for dividing people as it goes on, and you get the more ambitious timey-wimey stuff. Some people really levitate to that and enjoy that stuff like I do, and some just can't be doing with it. So if this gets as weird as some people have been saying, that will be interesting to see. Really like it so far. It is scratching those sorts of niches that I like. there's plenty of intrigue set up. Really, from the opening, you get a good sense of mood and like atmosphere. The look of the town, it's a very like sparse sort of off the beaten track sort of town. It's almost feels quite post-apocalyptic, which is quite suitable, but it has a very like gothic style feel to it, like and just the visual mood of the show is set up instantly because you have the sheriff walking down like the streets ringing this bell telling people to like it's curfew time to get in, and you've got this really dusty breezy looking town and the camera's like moving through it, and it just sets a very distinct tone from the start. And this I can see is going to be a very like suspenseful, tense show with some good horror moments. So too, and that's partly because episode 2 was very kind of contained in the fact that you had like 2 different sets of characters and it was kind of intercutting between them, and that was very well done. Like the way that episode opens is you kind of get one set of characters, and it's the characters in the camper van and the threat coming outside with these monsters trying to get inside. And then that was kind of intercut with like the other group, and they're being taken to this house. Newcomers to the town are taken and can take shelter, and they're trying to get inside, trying to rush them inside before these things can get at them. And the way that's intercut and the direction of that scene is very well done, and the use of atmosphere and the weather, and I think just the use of like tight little spaces, like the stuff with the family in the camper van, that's really quite unsettling and suspenseful as well. But like I said, it does set up some good intrigue early on. I'm not really sure how big the characters are going to be, as in like it's going to be about the character depth and the characters are going to go on journeys and change, but certainly I would say quite early on it set up some decent characters for me. Like I wouldn't say I liked all of them. The mother of the family, Tabitha, I thought was a little bit grating at times. Like they just made her a bit too agitated, a bit too like in your face a little bit. And there's one or two others from like the smaller characters who I were a little bit grating, but it's still very early, and I think you've only got like basics so far from most of the characters. There are a lot of characters, I'll say that, so I guess from that you can see why this could become quite a successful like multi-season show, because we've had 2 seasons and there's already like a 3rd season being commissioned, so there's kind of the potential there to grow these characters, or grow some of them anyway. But generally speaking, I thought they were solid characters. There were some like likable ones, like Christy, the EMT who we're introduced to early on. She's very likable. She has a way about her where you can see how this is a really sympathetic, like likable, fun character who's just easy to get on with, and you can see why she's a good EMT. But instantly, because she's looking after the father, the elderly father of the deputy sheriff, Kenny his name is, and we see that there's a little bit of chemistry between them early on, where certainly on his part there's a little bit of a crush you can see. Like I don't know if it's so much on her part or if she's just like friendly, but there's definitely something they could do with those two when it comes to having a bit of a romance. But you did feel the chemistry quite nicely in that scene. But the fact that she's so good at her job and such a caring, like down-to-earth person from the start, it makes you like her. But I think you see other sides of her later on, like in episode 2, I think it is, when she's looking after the father and his son in the camper van, that then she is maybe a little bit more. She has a tougher side to her as well, which is quite appealing. And one of the things they hint at is that there's a past to this town because of what they've been through. So the woman running the house, for example, she tells Tabitha, the mother, then she tells her then she lost her sister in brutal circumstances, and it was because of a similar scenario on the road. And she mentions about this tree that once you see it, you almost stop dead, and that's kind of how they get you. And this is something which is brought up by other characters as well and becomes a thing at the end of episode 2. So they're definitely setting up certain motifs and certain ideas which they're going to come back to. But we start to get a little bit of a sense of history of people who have died in the past, have been victims of this. And just then there is something lurking in the town's history, but also then there's a little bit more to this. There's a little bit more of a mystery to exactly what's going on. And there's certain things that happen to characters which is like, okay, what exactly is going on? Because like one of the guys who like crashes on the road, he seems to be like very sort of tripped out, like almost like high, and is just saying weird things, like calling everybody beautiful. And it could just be one of those things that then it's just because he's had a crash and he's like all spaced out. But I did think maybe then it could be something a little bit different, a decent sense of the characters, and there's a good few then I'm interested in like seeing more from. Obviously the sheriff is one of them, the deputy sheriff. Some of them do feel a bit like basic generic characters you see in like network style shows, but it could just be because we haven't really gotten as much from them. But there's definitely a few that are set up, and there's a bit of intrigue around there. Like care about them enough by the end of like episode 2, because one of the things that happens with a big development is then Kenny loses his father at the end of episode 2, and that's a really devastating moment, and loses him to like the creatures. And it's because of this thing with this girl Sarah who's like let them in, and it's because she's been under their spell almost, like they're controlling her, and that's what they do. They've got her to open the door and let them in. Like she's obviously working at the place looking after this guy, and the turn is that she ends up killing him, and she says to him first, it's not your fault, and it's revealed later that she's in the corner and she's appears to be talking to someone, and it's revealed that she seems to be under a spell. And that's the whole thing. That's a really freaky development, because you're like, well, what's going on here? Is she one of them? And it dawned on me later or it was made clear that she was like under their spell type thing, being controlled, because she goes to someone she's close to later. I'm not sure if it's meant to be her brother or just someone she knows, but just asking him to help her, and says then, yeah, they were controlling me. They got me to open the door. And certainly this show doesn't hold back with the gore and some of the more like graphic style moments. If anything, like maybe some of those moments are a little bit in your face, and it feels a bit like, okay, we're making a statement here. And whereas I think they could hold back on those moments a bit, and it would still be just as effective. But I do like the introduction to the show, and the way we already know from the start, because you get like a bit of a jump scare before the opening credits, because you have this girl with her grandmother appearing to her at the window, and it's obvious that it's one of the creatures. I'm not quite sure how you would describe these things yet. They seem very sort of zombie-esque, but then they also appear in quite a ghostly fashion. But and the girl is tricked into thinking it's really her grandmother, and obviously she's very vulnerable. The whole family dies, and there's a whole thing with that where the Boyd character is like just lays into the father, and because he's been on a night out drinking, and like he goes a bit far with it, but like naturally you can understand where he's coming from, where he's just pissed at this guy because he's not respected the curfew. He's been out drinking, and like, and it seems like Boyd has this very like traditional nature. It's like, yeah, you look after your family, and we just see some examples of like protocol in this town, because like after this goes down, he tells the deputy to like lock him up. And I mean, speaking of the deputy and like Christy, this EMT, like there's this sense also then some of these characters have just taken on like jobs like this where maybe otherwise they wouldn't be in such high profile positions, because like the deputy is very young. Like he's a bit older than he looks, but he just seems then he's maybe a bit younger than the deputy sheriff otherwise would be. But and there's something with Christie at one point where she says, I was a third year medical student when all this started to go down. He's talking to the father of the family. It's of like a town, putting people in roles who they think are the best suited because they don't have a lot of resources, and a lot of people have maybe died out. He tells her what her job is, and she's like, oh, okay. You're still talking like it's in the present. And it's at that point, Boyd, is kind of like, yeah, that's enough. And so almost like she's very cynical in that moment. It's like, because that's the whole thing, that it appears as though these characters could be screwed by coming through here and stopping. I think I like episode 2 even more, just because you find out a little bit more about the characters and this town and some of the past. And I do like the fact that there's certain rules that are set up. In the woods, they can only attack them after dark. So when you've had this crash and they're injured and stuff, like they have to move quite fast because it's getting quite close to when the sun goes down. So like Kirsty only has a certain amount of time to treat them, and that's why they have the idea to go in the camper van to treat their creatures trying to get in, like knocking on the doors. And the father's not sure what to do, like he's very paranoid and scared, and they have to like make it clear that no, we need to stay in here no matter what. Rules that set up where there's a problem presented and they have to find a way to deal with it. They have to improvise because Kirsty needs enough time to treat them, but maybe because of the condition of the boy, for example, where he's got like a spike through one of his legs, then they probably, it might not be an option just to take them back to the house. It might not be that easy. some of the protocol at this house when the others get there, tied up when they get there, because it's like we can't take any chances. Sometimes newcomers react in a certain way. Quite enjoyed like the theme of like creatures and the theme of fairy tales, kind of the myths and the way that was used. And that's something which is set up very early on, because when you have this family, daughter Julie is teasing the brother like he's like a younger brother, like, and she's playing with his like figures and she's trying to scare him, which is obviously working, but she's like teasing him about monsters and like how they're gonna get him, typical sibling stuff. And like at one point, because there's another good horror moment where like you've got these crows surrounding them when they stop, and like she's teasing him about that. Agatha is like encouraging him, saying no, don't worry sweetie, there's no such thing as monsters, all that kind of thing. And there's actually a nice callback to that at the end of episode 2, because when they're now settled in this home, in this house, like Julie is playing with the brother again with the toys, but this time, because of what they've been through, it's a more positive thing where she's actually assuring him, don't worry, things will be alright. So that's a nice callback to it. Woman running the house, where she starts telling the mother of Tabitha about some of this stuff. Do you believe in monsters, which is a nice way into it. Also the paintings the son of the sheriff does, which we find out later on is like some of the monsters, or appears to be. I think he's certainly done paintings of the trees, but also some of the monsters, because the son, like the young boy, has visions or dreams of like these things, and then it cuts to the paintings. There's another nice little scene as well with the daughter Julie and this girl Festa, something like that her name is, and she's a character who's been hanging out with the boy a lot, the son of the sheriff, and they seem, I don't know if they're boyfriend girlfriend or if they just hang out as friends, but she's been helping him with the artwork and doing some modelling, and she has a nice moment, freaked out by being tied up and not sure if she can trust these people. So I think to sort of break the ice, she takes Julie upstairs and shows her some of his artwork, and the purpose of that is just to show her that there's a lot of beauty in the town as well. Like, she can enjoy the pictures, and she shows her the outside and the view and how pretty that is. So that's just a nice little bonding moment and a way for that character to get Julie on side. And again, it makes you like that character as well from the start. As I said, I just liked when they set that up as a thing when this family were coming in and they're discussing it. It definitely has a mood and a style. It has a lot of intriguing ideas than it sets up. Some decent characters. As I said, some characters I like more than others, but we haven't really gotten that much. Very suspenseful, which I like about it, and there's like a quirky, almost like Twilight Zone feel to it at times. Partly like the scene where the family in the camper van are just going on a loop, where, because they've asked the sheriff for directions, and I think he's on purpose misdirected them, but they just keep going round on a loop, and they can't get like a cell phone signal, or they can't really see any signs, and they just end up in the same place, and that's very Twilight Zone. And the whole thing in the camper van leading up to the incident, the crash, it's very well done, very like suspenseful. There was the odd small moment of humour as well, which I did appreciate. So like a scene that stands out with that is then when they're in this house and the guy who was a bit like trippy and part of the accident, when they're looking after him, it's like the son Jonas, And this other girl who we only see in this scene, but her whole deal is that then she's kind of into the guy and attracted to him. And the whole gag of the scene is, even though he's very bloodied and disgusting, which she says, she's like, oh, but he's still really attractive, really cute, I'm still into it. And Joan's like, oh, please, come on. And that was pretty funny and a nice break from some of the darker, more tense stuff. So she was the character I quite enjoyed in that scene. See how it goes. Like, it could still like fall apart, but it's definitely very solid so far, and a lot of what it's doing is to my tastes. I think, as I said, episode 2 was even stronger, and that one was directed by Jack Bender, and I thought it was directed very well, and was very sort of creepy at times, and you definitely got a bit more meat to the town and the characters. The big thing with Sarah as well, which I almost forgot to mention, is then she says to the guy, then they promised her they would help her if she unlocked the door to the hospital. Like, they promised her she could go home. And that's the thing, a sense that I get, then these characters can't leave this town. Like, it definitely feels like this, and I think that's why there is a sense of doom, because maybe for a lot of them, they just figure if they can't escape, then eventually these creatures will get them. So there's a sense they can't leave, so that's definitely something which will be like played with, I'm sure, and explored. But with this being the sort of show it is, or the sort of show I've heard it's meant to be, it does make you wonder if maybe there's going to be something where some of these characters are from a different time, or a different, I don't know, well, you can speculate ad nauseum, but maybe a different planet. Guy's reaction where he was saying, oh, you're all so beautiful, if that could be something. But this stuff with Sarah, obviously, where she's saying they promised us we could go home, now that could just be literally like their town, wherever they are from, but like maybe they've just been trapped here a long time, or it could be something else. Let me know your thoughts if you've seen it in the comments below. Like and subscribe and all the rest of it. Share me out on social media. If you want to support the channel monetarily, there's a couple of ways. You can make a one-off donation on PayPal, or for just $1 a month, you can support me at patreon.com/borednow for a series of perks over there. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.